By this point, you should be confident conjugating verbs of the first and second conjugation in the present and imperfect active indicative. So remember, the first conjugation is marked like woko, wokare, is marked by that A in the stem, woko, wokas, wokat. And in the imperfect, wokabam, wokabas, wokabat. So that A is going to be there in the stem. And in the second conjugation, like habeo, habere, it's going to be marked by this E throughout. So habeo, habes, habet, and in the imperfect, habebam, habebas, habebat. Now the third conjugation, and this lesson is going to introduce you into conjugating the third conjugation in the present and imperfect active indicative. We're going to combine both of those tenses in the same lesson. And it's going to be a little different because the third conjugation is really, the stem is a consonant stem. It's got a very weak vowel at the end of it. So that vowel is going to shift a little bit, unlike the A, which is going to stay throughout, or the E, which is going to stay throughout. So let's take a look at what a third conjugation verb looks like. Our paradigm verb here is going to be duco, to lead, so duco, ducere, duxi, ductum. And it's marked, the third conjugation is marked by a short E in the infinitive. And the other thing you'll note as you start learning these is that the principal parts of the third conjugation are going to be a little more complex than the first and second. But let's compare, first of all, this second and third conjugations and how the principal parts differ. So, duco, ducere, I said this is a short E, as opposed to the long E of habeo, habere. But if a text doesn't have them marked, doesn't have the macrons marked, how are you going to distinguish a second from a third conjugation? And the easiest way to do it is to look to the first principal part. If you see an E in that first principal part, habeo or moneo, to warn, a second conjugation will always have its first principal part in EO. A third conjugation will never have an E there. We will run into some where they will have an I, so the verb facio, but you'll never have an EO. So if you see a second principal part in ERE, look to the first. If there is no E, it's a third conjugation, and it's going to follow this pattern. So let's look at that present tense first. The first person singular, I lead, you already know, because it's the first principal part. And the nice thing about third conjugation, all the conjugations, is that your endings are going to be consistent. So duco, ducis, ducit, ducimus, ducitis, ducunt. Ost, mustis, unt. Like your first conjugation, woko, wokas, wokat, wokamus, wokatis, wokant. Like your second, habeo, habeis, habet, habemus, habetis, habent. Now the only difference here, so we've got these same endings, the difference is going to be the vowel that we sit between the stem and the ending. And it's going to shift a little bit. So duco, in most cases it's going to be an I. Ducis, ducit, ducimus, ducitus, but in the plural, third person, they lead, it is going to be a U. And that's because this is a short, sort of almost non-existent vowel. So duco, ducis, ducit, ducimus, ducitus, ducint doesn't quite sound right, but ducunt, it lengthens a little bit because of the two consonants here. So memorize duco, ducis, ducit, ducimus, ducitus, ducunt, and you'll be able to conjugate any verb of the third conjugation in the present tense. Verbs like pono, so pono, ponis, ponit, ponimus, ponitus, ponunt, or dico, I say, dico, dicis, dicit, dicimus, dicatis, dicunt. Now let's move on to the imperfect. First thing you should notice about the imperfect tense, your endings are still the same. MST, mustis, unt. So these are the same as the imperfect tense for the first and second conjugation. Second thing you should notice is that the tense marker still has that BA in there. So in the first conjugation and the second conjugation, you had wokabam, habebam, and so on. So we've got that bom, bos, bot, bomus, botus, bont. The one thing that you should watch for, though, is that the third conjugation will always have this E as part of the tense marker. So the tense marker really is EBA. So Duke e bom, Duke e bos, Duke e bot, Duke e bomus, Duke e botus, Duke e bont. Remember, this E doesn't show up in our present tense, duco, ducis, ducit. It shows up, though, in the imperfect. So Duke e bom, Duke e bos, Duke e bot. And you could do this with just about with any other third conjugation verb. So with our pono, I put, it would be pon, e bom, pon, e bos. You were putting pon, e bot. He, she, or it was putting or used to put. So keep in mind the vowel of the present tense and the EBA of the imperfect tense.